Yo guys, it's your friend here, bringing you another awesome Naruto what if tale. Which is, without wasting your time, let's start the fanfic. What if Naruto was a silent shinobi in high school DxD? A groan could be heard all around the small house as a boy around 16 and 17 opened his eyes slightly and looked at his newest alarm clock, wondering just how many more alarms he had to get before he begins to leave a dent in his table if everything continues like this. Last night he had stayed up late for the sake of work, so he had gone to sleep pretty late, and it didn't take a genius to tell he's not a morning person. Naruto Uzumaki sat up from his bed and grabbed the destroyed alarm clock before throwing it out of the window, unsurprisingly making the destroyed clock fall right into the open garbage bin in front of his house. The boy ran his hand through his unruly golden blonde hair. Azure blue eyes blinked rapidly to get used to the bright sunlight that's shining outside of his house. Well, happy 17th birthday. Naruto looked at the small calendar on the wall and saw it was October 10th, the day he was born years ago. To Naruto, his birthday was something he really enjoyed. That was the day when he let himself have a day off, no work, no part-time jobs, and definitely not some certain research involving naked woman. Just him and his ramen while letting himself being lazy all day. Stretching his body, the blonde stood up and muttered the last part of his speech, again, and headed out of his bedroom. Naruto took a walk around the street he was living on to enjoy the fresh air of the morning after finishing his breakfast. Wherever he went, people seemed to recognize the blonde and greeted Naruto with a friendly smile or a happy wave, which the blonde happily returned. It was really strange, considered that he just moved here a few days ago, but just in that little time Naruto had helped them a lot by doing jobs for the people living around him, no matter how small they were. He nearly let out a chuckle when he remembered how different it was back then when he was still lived in his village, the place where he originally came from. Naruto scratched his whiskers cheek and smiled nervously to a group of high school girls that walked past him, giggling while saying how cute he looked with his whiskers, and not to mention his handsome features and athletic frame. Naruto had never been a guy that wanted attention, while most of his childhood had been seeking for that, but right now, he had learned that attention only caused trouble afterwards. As the years pass, he would eventually have to move, and these people, they would be just that. A group of people happened to walk past him. Naruto just moved to this town and saw that this place was indeed what he was looking for a long time now. He could live here for a few years, especially since the young girls at this town were quite attractive, which could help a lot for his legendary masterpiece, the main source of his income. Arriving at a bakery, Naruto pushed the door open and decided to buy himself a piece of cake for his birthday. Despite repeating again and again, year after year, it's not your birthday every day, and Naruto enjoyed each of his to the fullest. A piece of cake wouldn't hurt either. Naruto was looking at the delicious-looking cake on the case when he saw a small girl with short white hair that passed her shoulder, two long bangs at each side of her head and golden yellow eyes. She had a really cute face and a petty frame, wearing clothes similar to what the group of girls were wearing this morning, realizing it was some kind of school uniform. The white-haired girl was on her toes, trying her best to reach for the cake that had been put too high for someone who had a childlike body like her. Smiling, Naruto walked to the girl and took the cake easily with his height. "Here you go," Naruto said with his nice guy grin and held the cake out to the girl, surprise evident on her face, and when he got a clear view of her face, he realized she was indeed really cute. Scratch that, she must be the cutest girl he had ever seen for a while now. "Thank you," she said quietly with her emotionless tone. This girl really reminded him of those masked guys back home, especially one of his friends, who never smiled nor put any emotions in their tone. "Well, see you later then." Naruto waved to her and continued his searching for the cake, completely unaware that her golden eyes were on him. Kaneko Tuju continued to stare at the blonde for a few seconds before turning her heels and deciding to head to school. For a brief second she swore she had felt something coming from that blonde, and it was quite familiar to her, but Kaneko couldn't place it. She had never seen him before. His appearance clearly showed that he was a foreigner, yet his voice had a clear Japanese accent. She would have to talk to her master later about him. Naruto paid for the cake before walking out of the store, not forgetting to flash a friendly smile to the shopkeeper, which made her blush furiously. The blonde, while walking back to his home, couldn't help but see more and more high school students coming from the opposite way of him, talking and laughing at each other, and all of them were wearing the same uniform for boys and girls, the same with the girl at the bakery. Curious, Naruto followed them to see what their school looks like. He missed that feeling after all. It had been years since his last school, and the blonde still remembered the feeling of a normal student at this age. While school life was completely boring and not the way he wanted it to be, Naruto really liked the strange taste schooling filled in his life and couldn't wait to start it again. Just a few moments later, Naruto stood in front of the school in the name of Kuo Academy. The boy felt himself let out a small wow, looking at the size of this school and the elegant feeling from it. Whoever owned this place must be insanely rich, or just insane enough to build a school like this for normal high school students. This place looked like it was built for rich students, yet the students seemed pretty normal to him. But nonetheless, Naruto liked it and decided he might stop at this place if he got bored or something like that. And it's not like it's going to hurt trying a new school again, right? Naruto thought to himself and decided to head home, but a loud cheer of excitement caught his attention and Naruto stopped mid-step before looking back at the school. He saw the group of students had parted into two lines, creating a long line for 4 students walking to school. Naruto recognized the small white-haired girl from before, walking with 3 other students, 1 boy and 2 girls. While they were far from his position, the schoolyard, it's too big for any normal school, Naruto had no problems seeing their appearance. The boy looked like he was around his age with blonde hair, in a darker shade than him. Averagely built, wearing the Kuo school uniform for boys. His most noticeable feature was his handsome face, which reminded Naruto of his best friend, but of course without the emo part. The boy was waving to the girls of the school, flashing them heart-melting smile, while the guys of Kuo just cursed out loudly and sent wave after wave of insults to him. Naruto let out a chuckle and shook his head. He understood what it felt like when a charming boy at their school steals all the young women's attention. The next one was a girl with long black hair that tied into a long ponytail by a large orange ribbon. Naruto unconsciously took out the special book he always carried with him and automatically wrote down the details when he saw her incredible, attractive body. Naruto was a little surprised he could find a school girl with a figure that put models to shame here. But nonetheless he couldn't help but stare at her body. Don't get him wrong, Naruto wasn't a pervert, it just his job required him a sharp eyes for women, especially ones with seductive bodies like the black-hair girl. Plus, now he understood why his old Toad sensei made the Ika Ika series. It was actually pure gold and always at the top 5 most selling series of the world since a long times ago. After selling the first books, which originally came from his old sensei, Naruto had decided to make his own Ika Ika series so he could always remember the man that guided him and helped him be the man he is now. It was really hard at first, considering the fact that he wasn't a super pervert, but after Naruto decided to go research for once just like Jiraiya used to, his book's reputation skyrocketed and began to publish the new episode once in a while. Currently Naruto had enough money to live happily for another 1,000 years. Consider how successful his series is, but the blonde wasn't someone who could sit down and enjoy a simple life, hell no. Let's see, Naruto muttered and wrote down his notebook rapidly without taking his eyes off her. 5'6", a gentle and extremely beautiful face. 3 sizes, 102, 60, 89, damn. G-cup, this girl is a real deal. Naruto chuckled to himself. Now all he had to do was create a personality that suited her appearance, maybe change her here and there, but her look could help him make a lot of money. And who knows, maybe she would become popular too, in one way or another. Naruto turned his gaze to the next person and nearly dropped his mouth to the ground in shock. Leading the group of students was a young woman who appears to be in her late teens with light skin, blue-green eyes and a buxom figure. Her most distinctive feature is her long, crimson-red hair that reaches down to her thighs, with a single ahoge hair strand sticking out from the top. Her hair also has loose bangs covering her forehead and side bangs framing her face. The young woman was wearing Kuo Academy girls' school uniform, which made her buxom figure stand out even more than before. The uniform consists of a white long-sleeved, button-down shirt with a black ribbon on her shirt collar worn under a black shoulder cape and a matching button-down corset, a magenta skirt with white accents, and brown dress shoes over white crew-length socks. All in all, she was a true beauty. Naruto had always had a thing for redheads. While this girl's hair color was crimson, he still felt some attraction toward her. Maybe it was something involving his dad's feelings for his mom. But what confused him the most was he had a feeling that he had seen her somewhere before. No, not her. He hazily remembered about a young woman with the same shade of hair, the same color eyes and a face that resembled a lot of hers, only much more mature and more attractive. Naruto felt his brain begin to hurt as he tried to remember, but he couldn't make out anything at all. Deep in thought, Naruto didn't realize that her beautiful eyes had turned to his direction and was looking directly at him. Their eyes met for a moment before Naruto quickly turned his head away, putting his notebook back to his pocket and returned home, walking at a normal pace, trying not to look like he was a stalker that was running away after being caught. Ryusuke Mori's eyes followed the mysterious young man with a frown on her face, wondering who was he. Naruto bit another mouthful of his croissant before taking his notebook and continued writing down his research for the next volume of the Ika Ika series. His azure eyes had been replaced by a pair of light purple ones, with the veins around his temples becoming more noticeable, looking at the couples who were making passionate love to each other. In most situations, Naruto would do the research himself, which meant spending some quality time with voluptuous women whom he could easily charm using his years of experience. But right now he wasn't in the mood and preferred using the old peeking methods to do the research. Naruto then stopped his writing and thought about the group of students he saw this morning. It was clear that they were not human. He didn't know what to call them, but they definitely didn't feel like humans. At first he thought they were some kind of alien species invading Earth, but he believed they weren't those ugly creatures with green skin that went to Earth and said, "Take me to your leader," and the aliens he had seen on TV couldn't hold a candle to the looks of the students from earlier, not if they had henge or something akin to that to change their appearance. Naruto then remembered the crimson-haired girl who had confused him the most after he saw her. Who was she? That question had been bugging him all day and yet he still had no idea, but the blonde felt like he had seen that face before. Not the girl herself, but from somewhere else before. It was really frustrating as Naruto thought deeper and deeper about it. Her hair color was truly unique, and of course Naruto would remember that kind of hair color if he had seen it somewhere before. He was quite smart, but clearly he was no genius. His noisy friends weren't any help either. Now he wished he hadn't refused his pineapple-haired friend's offer to help him improve his intelligence from a long time ago. Swallowing the last piece of his croissant, Naruto looked at his notebook, which was already filled with so many ideas that pervy Sage would pass out from a massive nosebleed. Naruto looked around and smiled slightly when he saw a helicopter heading his way. As much as he wanted to play a prank, this wasn't the time for that, and he really didn't want to freak anyone out. Deactivating his eyes, Naruto gently let himself fall from the top of the Eiffel Tower just before the light of the helicopter could catch him. The blonde closed his eyes as he enjoyed the gusts of wind that blew past his face. Just before becoming a splatter mark on the ground, Naruto snapped his eyes open and disappeared in a flash of yellow, leaving Paris silently. Ryusuke Mori frowned when she saw that mysterious boy walk past her school once again, seemingly in a hurry while carrying a small bag in his hand. The blonde had been on her mind lately, after seeing him looking at her with confusion in his eyes. Ryus didn't know why, but she swore she had seen him somewhere before. With his whiskered cheeks and unique features, he would stand out a lot, and there were no way she could forget someone like that. Not only that, Kaneko had told her about the strange feeling coming from him when she met the blonde at the bakery. While Rias felt absolutely nothing from him and knew that he was a normal human, she couldn't help but felt something off about the blonde. The way he carried himself seemed rather strange somehow, not to mention the way he observed his surroundings. He was truly an enigma. Rias turned to her black-haired queen and saw she was reading a familiar orange book while giggling perversely. She had to admit that the book was really good. While it was not her type of book, Rias could call herself a big fan of Ika Ika series. Still, she hoped the current author of the series could come out of the shadows and let the world know who he or she was. Minato Namikaze, Jiraiya the Toad Sage, Kushina Uzumaki, and nearly 100 years ago it was Sasuke Uchiha. It was like each family generation would take over the series after 60 or 70 years, maybe it was a family tradition. Getting back to her current business, Rias watched as Naruto Uzumaki began to wander around the school, taking out a small notebook and writing down something rapidly. Just as she began to wonder what he was writing, the infamous perverted trio of Kuo Academy ran across the schoolyard screaming in fear as the girls of the Kendo Club chased after them in anger, bakens in their hands. Rias nearly let out a soft giggle when she saw Issei Hyodo, the boy she was keeping an eye on, being chased around and still couldn't believe that he was the current best candidate for her peerage. Just then, she saw the blonde finish his writing and put the notebook back into his pocket and walked away. Rias sighed and decided to take a bath, wanting to clear her mind. Maybe the blonde was just that, a boy that happened to pass by Kuo Academy. He was just that, a human with nothing special. But just before Rias could turn her head away, her eyes widened in shock when she saw the boy stop in his mid-step and turn back, bringing his hand up and waving happily to her direction. Rias nearly jumped from the surprise while looking around to search for any student that was waving back at him, but then realized she was the only one in his eyesight. He was grinning brightly, making Rias' eyes widen even more. It was impossible for him to see her from where he was, no matter how good his eyes were. Unconsciously, Rias brought her hand up and waved slightly to him with shock evident on her face. She saw his grin widen even more before mouthing some words to her. She wasn't the best at reading lips, but it was clear to her that he said, "Naruto Uzumaki," before continuing to walk away. It was only later that day did she realize that he had given her his name. "Bushu, something wrong?" Akano looked up from her book and asked her master with her usual gentle smile. "Nothing, Akano, nothing at all," Rias said slowly before standing straight up. Folding her arms under her large breasts, Rias let out a smile before making a mental note of getting to know him. Turning around, she immediately headed to the student council's room to find any information she could about the new guy in town. "Here's your ramen." Naruto grinned and put 3 bowls of ramen down on the table. "Uzumaki-san, 2 more please." "On it," Naruto shouted out and quickly returned to the stand and made another bowl of ramen. The blonde hummed a soft tune while making the food of gods, happy that his ramen stand was successful in this town, and he was even happier when he could introduce the food that the gods had given to humanity, to these mortals. "Give me Milika's Searsex, this is between you and me," I shouted with so much frustration and hatred. "No, Naruto-san, this is much more than that," the red-head man said with an evil smirk before snapping his finger, summoned a gun from thin air. "I wonder, what could happen if I happened to pull the trigger?" He moved the gun and aimed at the small baby's head, "at my dear nephew." "Shut up," I screamed out. Panic began to wash over my body. "I swear if I get my hand on you." "So what?" he said again. "I got your son in my hand, and really didn't need this thing to make him disappear." Searsex smirked at really what he was saying. "Think about it, Naruto-san. I could kill Milika's and then you can kill me, but what would happen to my dear sister?" Searsex then pointed the gun to Naruto. "Or, I could kill you and I will return Milka's to her." I cursed out loudly. From the beginning I already got the feeling he would say that. Why are you doing this? I asked with some relief in my voice, knowing I have a chance of saving both my son and wife. There's no way that gun could kill me, Kurama and everyone will take care of that. You want to know why? Sirzex asked, his voice full of venom. Everything was going to be perfect for me until you decided to train my dear twin. I looked at him in shock. Slowly, she took away my glory with that little power of her, and to my surprise, he fired the first bullet at my leg. Pain shot through my body as the bullet pierced my skin. Looking at the wound, my eye widened when I saw the wound didn't close up. My vision began to turn blurry. Something wasn't right with that bullet. Surprise, right? Sirzex asked. This thing was made specially for you, Naruto-sama, being made from the man that you had killed during the war and before he could use this gun against you. Sirzex smiled before released another round of bullets at my body. I didn't try to dodge, knowing he had my son in his hand. And oh, not forget to mention that silver-haired maid that decided to change side just because of you. Sirzex looked at the gun before walking closer to me, continuing fired that cursed gun at my body. Inside my head, Kurama and the other was screaming for me to run. How could I when he holding my son in his hand? Soon, when he was in front of I was on my last legs. Now, say bye-bye to your father Milikas-kun. I looked at my son, who was looking at me with his big blue-green eyes and smiled. He got my wife's eyes. It's all right. I mouthed those words to him as Milikas looked at me curiously while I got the feeling that she was looking at me, through our son's eyes. The gun slowly moved to the top of my head. After I was dead, I got 32nd right. Scientists said that when once die, their brains still function. Well, I really doubt my brain will be the same after this. Just 32nd, and you will die, Sirzex. Oh, thank you, Naruto-kun. The woman smiled brightly, seeing her water pipe had been fixed. Don't worry, Oba-san, I'm happy that I can help you. Naruto said while shaking his head with a smile on his face before standing straight up and heading out. See you later then, Oba-san. And ran out of the house before the old lady could find some way to repay him, even though fixing the water pipe was everything he had done for her. Naruto slowed down and began walking down the street, enjoying the warm sunlight of a new day. His mind slowly went back to the silver-haired woman he met 2 days ago who later spent a hot and passionate night with him. Now thinking back to that day, Naruto swore he saw confusion and disbelief in her eyes when she looked at him, but she hid it rather skillfully, too skillfully for his liking, especially for a lady nowadays. It really didn't help that her beauty was completely unnatural. Naruto cursed his luck with women. Jiraiya used to say the same thing to him about his luck with them was as bad as his with money, and back then Naruto didn't believe him one bit. Not even a month and he already met 4 beautiful and lovely young women and a breathtaking beauty. But who was he to complain about that? After all, he nearly finished the next volume of Ika Ika thanks to Graphia's kindness 2 nights ago. It was still hard to believe that there was someone could match his stamina. However, it was clear to him that she wasn't human. After meeting a hot, crimson-haired young woman and a blonde nun with healing powers, he couldn't find himself surprised at the situation anymore. But it was rather strange to say the least, considering that he never met some of them in his life until now. Their unique features would make him notice them, especially if they were drop-dead gorgeous like Rias or Graphia, and he doubted that that black-haired, busty girl wasn't like them as well. While at the same time, he could say that Asia was indeed human. Oi, out of the way. Deep in thought, Naruto just realized a boy with brunette hair and a lecherous face, who he recognized at Issei Hyodo from the perverted trio of Kuo Academy, screamed out in terror as he drove his bike towards him at blinding speed. Naruto's mind whirled into action, trying to calculate which way to dodge the incoming bike that would most likely crash into him in just a few seconds. He had 2 options. The first was to jump into the air to avoid the boy, but he would have to jump really high to get out of the way, which would raise some unwanted questions. The second option was to stop the incoming bike with his strength, which looked impossible for a normal human, but it was nothing for Naruto. The second option seemed easy enough for him, and this entire thought process ran through his mind in just a millisecond. Naruto then blinked when the boy was about to crash into him, and he chose the always present third option. Naruto took a step back, letting the perverted boy and his bike go past him harmlessly and crash into the wall behind them, with the boy flying right into the garbage bin. Ria's jaw nearly dropped to the ground in shock at what she just saw. She had expected Naruto to do some superhuman jump or stop the bike with his body or something like that, but he just stepped out of the way like it was the most obvious thing to do. Looking at the blonde who was checking on Issei, she really wondered if he was as special as what she gave him credit for. As she walked towards him, the conversation she had with her sibling 2 days ago returned to her mind. Rias was walking towards the main office Lucifer Castle in deep thought. She had just reincarnated Issei Hyodo into a devil and used up all her pawn pieces to do so, which brought joy to her when she realized maybe she had gotten a strong servant, yet at the same time confused as to why he needed all of her pawns. She really needed some advice from her older sibling right now. Shana-sama, please return to your work immediately. Rias stopped right in front of the door that led to Lucifer's main office and froze at the voice of Graphia Lucifuge. No matter how many years had passed, she would never get used to the cold and chilling voice that always frightened Rias, especially if those words were directed to her. But fortunately, the victim of Graphia's silent wrath wasn't her this time. Graphia-chan, can't you cut me some slack? I'm bored. Rias opened the door and stepped into the room, looking at the woman who was lying on the couch with nothing but her underwear. She had long, flowing crimson hair and bright blue-green eyes just like her. The most noticeable thing about this woman was her face, which looked just Rias but much more mature in some way. Everyone always mistook them as twins, but Rias always thought that this woman, who was her sister, was much more beautiful than her. And the fact that she was wearing nothing but a bra and a lacy thong not only made Rias become red from embarrassment, but also realized that her sister's amazing figure made her best friend Akino look modest in comparison. Shana Lucifer, formerly Shana Grimori, turned her eyes slightly to her sister, and then in a blink of an eye, Rias found herself being hugged tightly and her face being sandwiched between 2 massive mounds. Rias-tan, Shana cried out in happiness, her sister complex going into overdrive at the sight of her beloved sister. I'm so glad you came to visit me. Get away from me, Oni-sama. Rias screamed out in anger as she tried to push her sister away from her but found it really hard because Shana's grip was too strong. Her hands, while trying to find her sister's shoulders to push her away, accidentally grabbed a handful of her sister's large breasts, making the older woman moan. Ah, how daring of you, Rias-tan. Shana said with a blushing face, if you want, we cool. Her speech was cut short when she felt a hand silently landing on top of her head, and grabbing a fistful of her hair. Shana gulped silently when she felt Graphia's cold, terrified aura flare out behind her, and she slowly turned her head to the silver-haired woman, who was looking at her with murderous eyes. Mercy. No. With a calm yet deadly tone, Graphia sealed her mistress' fate. A few spankings later. I'm so sorry for Shana-sama's behavior, Rias-sama. Graphia bowed her head down and said with her usual monotone. Behind her, Shana was lying on the couch with her ass high in the air, red from the spanking Graphia had just given her. You're so mean, Graphia-chan. With tears in her eyes, Shana tried to sit up, but her ass cheeks were hurting like hell. Graphia never held back whenever she delivered punishment. Anyway, Oni-sama, I just reincarnated a boy as my newest servant. Rias snapped her fingers and a folder appeared out of thin air, landing on her sister's lap. His name is Issei Hyodo and he was killed by a fallen angel. It took me all 8 of my pawns to bring him back. Shana nodded her head and looked at the folder in her hands. Except for the fact that he was killed by a fallen angel, he seemed pretty normal to her. But what troubled Shana the most was why had the fallen angels targeted the boy in the first place? Either he had some kind of powerful ability or a powerful sacred gear. She would need to have a word with Azazel after this for letting his people go running around his sister's territory. Okay, I will read it later for you, Rias-tan. Shayna suddenly stood up, making her breasts jiggle, and walked to her desk, opened a folder and put the documents about Issei Hyodo inside. Sighing, she took the robe from her chair and put it on. This was going to be a stressful night for her, not only because of the paperwork she needed to do but also because of a few incidents that occurred because of stray devil activity in the human world lately. And by the way, Oni-sama, before Rias left the room, her mind went back to a certain blonde-haired ramen chief that had become one of her friends recently. Do you know anyone by the name of Naruto Uzumaki? She knew it was stupid to ask questions since it was unlikely that her sister knew anyone by that name. But her eyes widened in shock from the reaction she was getting from Shayna and, surprisingly enough, Graphia. Shayna's eyes, which just a moment ago were mischievous and happy, became replaced with wide eyes of horror. Her perfect pair of lips opened and closed in shock as she looked like she wanted to say something, then her knees began to shake before Shayna fell to her knees, much to Rias's shock, who immediately ran to her sister. Looking back at Graphia, she saw that the silver-haired maid wasn't faring any better than her sister. Oni-sama, Oni-sama. Rias called out for her sister in worried. Shayna then turned her head slowly to her sister and muttered, "No, why, you're kidding me, right? Tell me you just heard that name from somewhere," Shayna said, nearly screaming at her sister. I met him, Oni-sama. He said he just moved into town a few days ago and wanted to join Kuo Academy." Rias answered with her voice wavering a bit but nonetheless telling the truth to her sister. Never in a million years would she think her sister would be so different like this. Shayna's eyes widened and gulped nervously. "And Naruto Uzumaki, did he have blonde hair and whiskered cheeks?" she asked with a hopeful tone, tears slowly forming at the corners of her eyes. "Yes, Oni-sama." Rias nodded her head and Shayna's eyes widened. Rias could see some hope slowly appearing in her sister's eyes. "Rias, did he mention anything about me?" In a blink of an eye, Shayna was on her knees, grabbing her sister's shoulder while nearly crying out, "Please tell me." "And no, Oni-sama, he didn't. He seemed very normal and I couldn't sense any special power from him, he's human," Rias said nervously, making her sister's eyes widen, and then she slumped back to the ground. "I knew it," Shayna muttered quietly to herself and wiped the tears out of her eyes. "He really is gone," she said as tears began to roll down her face. "Oni-sama," Rias began, "are you?" "Don't worry, Rias-tan, I'm fine." Shayna wiped the tears away and looked at her sister, letting out a soft smile and kissed the top of her little sister's head and stood up, but her legs were still shaking slightly. "Now if you'll excuse me, I got a job to do or else Graphia-chan will get angry at me." Seeing no room for rebuttal, Rias stood up and bowed her head down and said farewell to her sister and left. Walking past Graphia, she saw the older woman trying to recompose herself as she looked at her mistress, her face rather pale. Rias closed the door to the room behind her and saw that Graphia slowly made her way to the crimson-haired Mao. Pretending to walk away, Rias silently returned to the door and put her ear to the door, trying to catch anything from her sister and Graphia while trying to erase her presence as much as possible. "Shayna-sama, please listen to me, maybe that was him," Rias heard Graphia say with a hopeful tone, a kind of tone that Rias never heard from the silver-haired maid before. "No, that person has been long gone now and we can't do anything about it," she heard her sister whisper to her maid. "He's just someone with the same name, that's all." "But, I saw everything with my own eyes. Shayna-sama, he said he will. It was just a stupid promise." "But Naruto-sama," slap. Rias' eyes widened when she heard the sound of a slap and of someone falling onto their backside from behind the door. She couldn't believe that her sister just slapped her best friend, with enough force that made the strongest queen fall on her ass. "Shut up," she heard her sister say in a cold and deadly tone. "Don't you dare say his name again, Graphia. Where were you when he fought for me and Milika's?" Where were you when he tried to protect the underworld with his life while at the same time trying to take back Malika's? Where were you, huh? He's dead, you hear me? Naruto Uzumaki is dead and. Then she heard her sister break down crying. Rias just stood outside of the door, listening to her sister sobbing and crying. End flashback. After that, she tried every way she knew to dig into this matter without letting anyone know what she was doing. Even going as far as asking her parents about Naruto Uzumaki, but made sure she didn't let them become suspicious. To say she got the same reaction from her parents was an understatement. It was clear that her family knew about Naruto and he must be really close to them. She had tried to look into the history books of devils, anything she could get her hands on to find out who exactly was Naruto Uzumaki, but couldn't find anything at all. That was when she realized that all information about him had been wiped out of existence, and the only ones who had enough power to do something like that was her sister, Shayna Lucifer, who was the Crimson Mao and the leader of Devil Faction. She didn't know why she did that, but remembering the pain-filled cries of her sister, Rias knew something had happened in the past. She had found an old newspaper from nearly 11 years ago and found out that the hospital her sister stayed at when she gave birth to Milikas had been attacked, and they were the only survivors that day. Rias shook her head rapidly to clear all the thoughts out of her mind because Naruto was nearing her. Looking right through her was something she knew Naruto was very good at. He can always tell if something was troubling her or not, and right now making her friend feel suspicious of her wasn't something she wanted to do. "Ohio Naruto-kun," Rias called out to the blonde who was trying to help a half-conscious boy to his feet. Looking at his bruised head, she felt rather bad for asking Issei doing something like that. "Issei, Ohio Grimori-chan." Naruto grinned brightly to her before casting his eyes to Issei, then to the crimson-hair buxom young woman, "You know the Gaki?" "Yeah, he is a member of my club." Rias nodded her head and looked at the boy worried. "I hope he's alright." "Well, in this condition he isn't waking up anytime soon." Naruto sighed. "Do you know where his house is?" "Of course, Naruto-kun, we better take him home before his parents get worried," she said and walked to the fallen bike. Issei was going to need this if he wanted to do devil jobs again. The duo began to walk to Issei's house with said boy on Naruto's shoulder while Rias followed closely behind, walking Issei's bike. "So, Grimori-chan, how was your day?" Naruto asked the crimson-haired girl. "Oh, you know, just the usual stuff. My sister tried to annoy me again. She sent a massive doll that looked exactly like her so I could always remember her when I go to sleep." "Like, really?" Rias asked with an annoyed tone, making Naruto laugh. Yep, her sister had returned to her normal self again like nothing had happened at all. "Wow, she must really love you to do something like that then?" Naruto asked with an amused tone. "In a way, maybe." Rias huffed. She wasn't a little girl anymore, and yet her sister still insisted on treating her like one. It was really annoying to say the least. "What about you, Naruto-kun, how was your day?" Rias turned her head to the blonde and asked him with curious eyes. "Nothing interesting really." Naruto shook his head and a huge grin appeared on his face. "But guess what, I'm going to join Kuo Academy next week, cool right?" "Really, Naruto-kun?" Rias smiled brightly as Naruto nodded his head rapidly. "I hope you will be sorted into the same class as I am, you're same age as me, right?" "Oh, I can't wait to introduce you to my friends." Naruto chuckled seeing Rias's happy face. She looked so beautiful like this. The two continued to talk with each other about random stuffs all the way to Issei's house and gave the boy to his parents. To say his parents were shocked when an extremely beautiful and attractive girl along with a handsome young man carried their pervert son to their home was an understatement. Naruto and Rias soon parted ways as the crimson-haired girl needed to meet up with her friends, but she didn't leave without promising to visit his ramen stand lat. "Gar, I hate my life." Naruto scowled as he stretched his shoulder. Who could have thought that fighting after such a long time could have a consequence like this? 2 days had passed since he had taken Asia under his wing. And 2 days since he slaughtered those stray exorcists. Naruto never enjoyed killing, not in a million years. But last night, he had found that those exorcists deserved the punishment that was waiting for them in hell, or wherever they had been sent to after he tore their body limb from limb, shoving his hand through their chests or beheaded them. It was truly a massacre. Naruto had showed those who dare stood in his way absolutely no mercy. Even the fallen angel Danesek wasn't spared from his wrath. He didn't care what they had done to Asia or other innocent people. All he cared about now was that they had been put out of the picture and Asia would be safe, at least for now. He didn't spare anyone. Last night, except for that gentleman-looking fallen angel, he had met two other fallen angels with the names of Kalawarner and Mitteld, who were as bloodthirsty and as sadistic as the other fallen angels he had met so far. Even though he didn't feel like killing them, they had tried to throw those light spears at him in an attempt to take him out before he had shattered them with his bare hands. But before he could take their lives, someone had put their hand on his shoulder and stopped him. After that, he got the pleasure of meeting with the Governor-General of the Grigori, leader of fallen angels, Azazel, who was one of the most dangerous men he had ever met and, in Shikamaru's words, the most troublesome man he had ever encountered in his life. Let's just say that he had a pleasant conversation with Azazel about what to do to the fallen angels that were still alive, who had happened to disobey his order and did things on their own accord. It would be better that he let Azazel deliver the punishments to those fallen angels. He never enjoyed killing, especially not beautiful and attractive women. Ni-sama, we have another order. A cheerful voice snapped Naruto out of his thoughts, making him turn to address the young girl in beside him. He smiled before saying, "On it, Asia-chan." Asia nodded her head with a cheerful smile and quickly drifted off to serve any costumers that needed her. This morning when Naruto began his usual daily business with his ramen stand, Asia had asked him if she could help him with anything so that she could repay him for letting her live with him. Of course Naruto had refused at first, saying that she didn't need to do anything, but after witnessing the legendary puppy dog eyes from a cute girl like Asia he had to shut his mouth and let her follow him. Let's just say that she was now Uzumaki's ramen stand's first waitress and his reputation had skyrocketed when his costumers saw a young and beautiful blonde girl standing in front of his stand, wearing a cute-looking waitress uniform with the symbol of Uzumaki on her apron. Who would know that having Asia be his stand's waitress could be such a good idea? He had to admit, Asia was clumsy at first, but she was doing very well in serving the ramen to the costumers, mostly the male ones. Her cheerful smile and brightness could brighten anyone's day. With Asia here, a new atmosphere had been brought to Uzumaki's ramen stand and Naruto really liked it. Looking at her now, running around with a cheerful smile on her face, Asia had truly brought a new light into Naruto's life forever. He just wished that he could hire some more people to help Asia. He was afraid that she might be pushing herself far too much by doing all that work by herself. After all, his ramen stand wasn't a small one. Naruto-kun. Naruto's head snapped up as he heard the familiar voice belonging to Rias Grimori as she stepped into his ramen stand. But this time she wasn't come to his humble stand alone, she also had the company of that extremely attractive black-haired girl who, one way or another, brought him a huge amount of fortune after he published the newest episode of Ichi Aika Paradise, with the name of Gentle Maiden. It was truly a great hit. Unconsciously, Naruto pushed the copy of that episode deeper into his pocket. A girl as gentle looking at her wouldn't be pleased if she found out that he used her picture as the main female character of the series. Hello there Rias-chan, and Akeno Himahima. It's a pleasure finally meeting you in person Uzumaki-san. Akeno said with her head bowed slightly. No need to be so formal. Naruto chuckled and held out his hand, shaking Akeno's hand before letting out a small smile. What's so funny? Rias asked, looking at Naruto's smile. Nothing Rias-chan, nothing at all. Both girls right an eyebrow as Naruto laughed softly. I just find that you have a very interesting friend here Rias-chan. Just as interesting as you. He smirked mysteriously. Rias and Akeno gave each other a glance before turning back to Naruto. What could he possibly mean by that? There was no way he found out the truth about them, right? Anyway, welcome to Uzumaki's ramen stand. Naruto spread his arms wide while grinning brightly. So, what are you two's orders? I will take the usual. Rias said before she sat down at her usual table, right in front of Naruto. I'm not a big fan of ramen. Naruto's eyes sharpened immediately, but all have the same thing as Bushu. Naruto nodded his head and returned to the kitchen to prepare the order while his mind was wandered elsewhere. After becoming aware of the existence of supernatural beings, he still wondered why in the bloody hell he didn't know about them till now. Naruto had become more aware of them by now and could clearly tell that both Rias and Akino weren't human. Rias emitted a different energy than Akino, while the black-haired girl emitted out a mixed energy comprised of fallen angels and whatever Rias is. Damn this supernatural stuff, it was slowly making him more and more confused. So, what do you think? Rias asked her queen as both of them conversed as quietly as they could, completely ignoring the lustful stares from the male population all around them. Odd, Akino whispered back, just as Kaneko-chan had said, he's giving out really strange magical signature, but it disappeared before I could triangulate it. Rias nodded her head, I don't know how to say it, but Naruto isn't fully human. He's human yes, but he's something else too, she trailed off. Excuse me. Before Rias could reply, a cheerful voice broke both of them out of their conversation and they looked up and immediately jumped out of their seats at what they were seeing. What's wrong? Asia asked nervously, looking at the two cautioned older girls in front of her, slightly taken aback due to both looking ready to attack her. There was nothing wrong with this girl, other than the silver cross she was wearing. Rias immediately knew that this girl was from the church by the aura she was giving out, and she could feel a very powerful sacred gear inside of this girl as well. Asia gulped when she realized everyone was looking at them. Can I have your order please? She asked again nervously. Rias spluttered out as she finally noticed the clothes the blonde girl was wearing. Don't worry Asia-chan, give these to them please. Naruto said cheerfully and handed Asia 2 bowls of ramen. He had saw all that happen and all that was enough for him to know what kind of supernatural being Rias and Akino were. Devils, they had reacted immediately when they saw the silver cross Asia was wearing. Okay Ni-sama. Asia nodded her head and carefully brought the ramen down to the table. Please enjoy your ramen. She bowed her head down and quickly walked off to do another job. Sorry about that Naruto-kun. Rias said sheepishly and sat back down to the table with Akino, who bowed her head down in apology. Don't worry about it, Naruto grinned. Still, I better be a little more cautious around these two. Apparently, they're not a fan of the church's followers, former or not. Naruto thought to himself as he kept a close eye on Rias and Akino, who were eating their ramen while eyeing Asia warily. The next morning, Naruto ni, Asia said nervously while playing with the hem of her school uniform skirt, do you think me going to this school is a good idea? Both blondes were walking on the street leading to Kuo Academy, wearing the repressive school uniform for boys and girls. Naruto had decided that today would be the day he came to Kuo Academy to give another go at school life, and he was bringing Asia with him. The former nun had been really nervous all this morning, but Naruto told her that this would be the best way for her to make friends, become more social, and get used to Japan's culture. Don't worry Asia-chan, he gave her a thumb up, you have Oni-chan here to protect you. Asia nodded her head, but didn't feel any less nervous in the slightest. She just hoped this school Naruto was talking about was as exciting as he claimed it to be. He had said this was the best place for her to make friends, but she really didn't know how to do that. Arriving at Kuo Academy, Naruto and Asia made their way to the headmaster's office without being noticed by anyone. Because he didn't want to attract attention too soon, Naruto had used his skills as a well-trained, recently slacking off, shinobi to sneak into the school without being caught. Though Asia had asked him why they needed to do this, Naruto just laughed and waved his hand saying they better hold the surprise for later. After parting with Asia, who had been placed into the second-year classes while was Naruto placed into the third-year classes. Naruto soon followed the teacher that had been assigned to lead him to his classroom. The blonde had to admit that the school's facilities were truly impressive, practically state-of-the-art based on a few classrooms he happened to pass by. Studying in a school like this was truly amazing. Truly amazing if he was a bookworm or something like that, but Naruto had never been the academic type. "This is your classroom," the teacher said with a kind smile. "Please wait outside for a moment, Uzumaki-kun," she said as she opened the door to the classroom and stepped inside, no doubt to inform the teacher and the other students of a new student. Naruto took a deep breath when he heard the female teacher called for him from inside of the classroom, opened the door, and stepped inside. Naruto immediately heard the gasping sound of the girls. The blonde's lips curled up slightly, always these reactions. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki, it's a pleasure to meet you all." He flashed everyone a charming smile before bowing his head down. "Please help me from now on." The blonde looked up slightly and saw a familiar young woman with flaming crimson hair looking at him with her mouth gaping in shock. Indeed, his time here would be very interesting. Immediately chaos broke out in this class. "Where are you from?" "A faraway land, but I can say that I'm part Japanese." "What's your favorite food and color?" "I like ramen in the orange color, and make sure to pay a visit to my ramen stand." "Do you have a girlfriend?" "No, I don't, but I'm very interested in finding one." That statement made the girls that were surrounding him squeal in delight and the males groan in contempt. Naruto had to hold back a chuckle at seeing the heart-filled eyes of the young female students and the heated glares from the males. This was always the kind of reactions he received from students whenever he arrived at any school. "Well, there goes not attracting too much attention. This has to be my dad's Namikaze charm at work. Now if you'll excuse me." Naruto began to back out of the classroom. "I need to check on my little sister." He waved back at them, not forgetting to wink at Rias, who was kept a very close eye on her favorite ramen chief. "Little sister," the girls whispered among themselves in confusion. Naruto ran through the corridors of Kuo Academy and soon arrived at Asia's classroom, not at all surprised when he saw her being in the same situation as him a few minutes ago. Asia looked extremely nervous because of all the attention she currently getting from everyone. However, the former nun was giving them her best smile which could brighten up anyone's day. Her eyes then landed on him and she proceeded to smile brightly and then wave at him. Naruto let out a small chuckle and waved his hand back at her. Suddenly his cell phone gone off. Curious, Naruto picked up his phone and saw an unfamiliar number. He gestured to Asia that he needed to take this call. Naruto quickly found some place quiet so he could have a private conversation with whoever this person was. "Uzumaki, Naruto here," Naruto said into the phone and then heard a somewhat familiar feminine laugh. Surprise, Naruto. You could hear the smile she had on her face from the tone of her voice. Graphia. His voice softened as he remembered the beautiful woman he met at that bar from Las Vegas, which later led to a hot, steamy night spent with each other. How did you get this number? He had thought she was just like any women he met in his life, just another fling. A little fun time together to relieve their stressful lives and then the next morning they would be on their merry way. It has always been this way from the day his own madness subsided and he began traveling. If anything, he was not pleased at all when somehow Graphia had gotten her hands on his number. My, you're so cold to little ol' me, Naruto. She giggled, and Naruto had to let out a small chuckle at that statement. He perfectly knew that Graphia was far old when things heated up between them. Yeah, what do you want, Graphia? He asked. Foo, did you think that I wouldn't recognize myself in the newest volume of the porn novel Ika Paradise series? His eyes widened. You've done an awfully good job at describing me, Namikaze Minato. His eyes widened once again when he heard his father's name coming from Graphia, which he had used as the current author's name for the series. I don't know what you're talking about, he said with a calm voice. If you're calling me just for this, then goodbye. Have a nice day. Wait. Naruto stopped his finger from pressing the close button when he heard the tone Graphia was using. He couldn't quite place it, but he could sense a hint of desperation in her voice. I was hoping to have a chat with you. I guess this is important then. Naruto thought before saying. So, where do you want to meet? That night, Naruto walked into the bar where he and Graphia had met before and quickly spotted the silver-haired woman, looking as stunning as ever. It's hard to not recognize her immediately because Graphia was drawing a lot of attention from everyone within the bar. She was beautiful and attractive, which was only emphasized by what she was wearing. The expensive-looking dress left her back and the sides of her hips bare, showing off her creamy skin and amazing figure nicely. The dress also had a long slit at the left side, showing her mile-long legs. Graphia was waiting patiently for Naruto to arrive, looking at the menu in her hand, and from the looks of it she hadn't decided to order anything yet, not even a drink. Damn, Naruto thought to himself as he made his way to her table. Graphia looked as stunning as he remembered, though he had to wonder why she wore such an expensive and impressive-looking dress like that in a situation like this, when they were just two people meeting each other for some small talk. Graphia looked up from the menu in her hands and let a warm smile form on her face as she saw the young man she was waiting for approaching her. Good evening, Graphia. I hope I didn't make you wait long. Naruto said as he pulled a chair out and sat down, facing the woman who had called him here. Hello, Naruto, Graphia said as she put the menu down and gestured to the bartender to come over. And don't worry, you came right on time. Naruto nodded his head at her. He didn't feel like coming here at all. Leaving Asia at home alone wasn't a good idea at all, even though he had made multiple clones around the house to protect her. But at the same time he didn't have any problem being here, accompanied by a beautiful and attractive woman like Graphia. He might be thousands of years old and sometimes he forgot to count how old he was, but the love for women and their attention was something Jiraiya had successfully passed down to him. So, what do you want to talk about? Naruto closed the menu and gave his order to the bartender. I hope it doesn't have to do with me being the current author of Ika Ika Paradise. Naruto said, and didn't like his tone when he said the word, current. Unfortunately for him, Graphia wasn't someone who would let something like that get past her, but she pretended to not notice it. In a way, yes. Naruto raised an eyebrow at her. But, I mainly wanted to talk about, Naruto held back an amused smile when he saw the woman in front of him look so troubled because of some simple words. Well, you can start by telling me who exactly are you? Naruto ignored the surprised look on her face and leaned his elbows on the table. I already had some unpleasant encounters with people with black wings and a group of exorcists who called themselves stray exorcists and had swords like those guys from Star Wars, Anna something and Obi what's-his-face, Naruto joked. Although, judging from the look on her face, Naruto could tell that Graphia already knew about what happened, and to make everything end like a fairy tale, I got a beautiful, blonde Imouto at home and a silver-haired stalker. My life is already complicated enough, thank you very much. He finished right before the bartender put his and Graphia's order down on the table. Itadakimasu, Naruto said blankly and began to eat his meal, which was a pizza. A pretty strange meal to have in one of the biggest and most popular bar in Las Vegas. While Naruto was eating his dinner and turned his eyes towards the window, seeing the colorful and exciting entertainments available at Las Vegas, Graphia hadn't touched her order at all. She just stared blankly at the dish while her face held an unreadable expression, but he could spot sadness and confusion in them. He sighed. You know, the dish isn't going to finish itself. Naruto broke the silence between them as he took a third slice of pizza and ate half in one bite. You can start by telling me what are you? Angel, fallen angel, or something else? Asia had told him everything she knew about the factions, however, her knowledge about them was very limited due to her position as a holy maiden, who the church had thought needed to be as holy as possible. Meaning that she didn't need to know any information other than who she could and couldn't heal. Graphia took a deep breath before saying, "I'm a devil, a pure-blooded devil." Graphia said, "My full name is Graphia Lucifuge and I am Mistress Lucifer's personal maid as well as her queen." "Go on." Naruto nodded, feeling familiarity towards the name Lucifer, but said feeling disappeared as soon as it surfaced in his mind. "My mistress's full name is Shayna Lucifer." As soon as Naruto heard, Shayna, a skull-splitting pain strikes, causing Naruto to wince in discomfort and massage his forehead. "Naruto!" Graphia yells with panic entering her voice after witnessing Naruto's reaction to her mistress's name. Back with Naruto, he was having a hard time trying to control his headache. He didn't know why he had this feeling, but Naruto thought he knew that name from somewhere, but all he could recall about her in his mind was nothingness. He couldn't remember anything about her, that's if he really knew who this Shayna was. "Sorry, a little headache. Please continue, Graphia," Naruto said with a smile after regaining his composure. The silver-haired maid looked at him with wary eyes before saying, "As I said, Naruto, Shayna Lucifer is my mistress and one of the 4 leaders of the devil faction, with the title of Lucifer. She's formerly known as Shayna Grimori." This information made Naruto's eyes widen in surprise. If this Shayna's last name used to be Grimori, then that meant Rias Grimori is her sister, isn't she? Naruto guessed. Rias could be the daughter or someone related to Shayna, but for some reason, he had chosen sister as the possible relationship between them. Yes, Naruto, Rias-sama is Shayna-sama's younger sister. She is the current heir to one of the most powerful devil households of the devil faction, the Grimori household. Naruto nodded his head at this. He should have known better. There was no way Rias could be entirely human. Not to mention the way she walked and talked was slightly reminded him about the rich girls and princesses he had met during his travel, though, he'll admit that she was a little tomboyish and more easygoing than most of the princesses he's met. Can't say I'm not surprised when I just found out that my favorite costumer is a devil princess. Naruto said, so, I guess I, one way or another, had accidentally gotten involved with these supernatural worlds. Goodbye peace and hello trouble. As much as I hate to say it, you and Asia Argento are not safe anymore, Naruto-sama. Graphia said, making Naruto a little surprised at being addressed by such honorable suffix. Asia Argento is a very special girl with a much more special sacred gear. Her power is very unique and quite useful, but Naruto had cut her off. Just so you know, I can protect myself in Asia. Naruto leaned back in his chair. I don't care who comes for us or what they might throw at us, I will take all of that and counter back 100-fold. Graphia shivered at the tone he was using. She clearly knew that he meant every word he said and had enough power to do back up his words. So tell your people, do not come for me or Asia. Save this, Lucifer, some headache and save me from one more enemy. He stood up and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small piece of paper he had prepared beforehand and gave it to the silver-haired woman. We better keep in touch from now on, so use this number to call me, safer this way. Call me if something happens or you have anything to tell me. The world could change, the people could change, but the ways to survive could never change. Information would always remain the greatest tool for survival. Graphia would be a great ally for him from now on because with her help and the information she could give him, the oblivious feeling he always had when it came to supernatural things would disappear eventually. I will, Naruto-sama. Graphia gently took the piece of paper, keeping her eyes on the blonde's frame till he disappeared from her view. I will. Thank you, please come again next time. Asia lowered her head down and said gratefully with a warm smile. The group of Kuo High School boys waved goodbye at her with a blush on their face. We should head home soon, Asia. Naruto looked at the clock. Rias-chan is coming at 7 o'clock to help you study, so we should be there when she comes. Yes, Oni-chan. Asia nodded her head and began to help Naruto gather their things. The life she was living with him was very different than her previous life, and to say Asia loved every minute with Naruto was an understatement. She loved to spend time with Naruto, who had saved her and changed her life. The two blondes headed towards their home with Naruto pushing the ramen stand. Business had boomed recently thanks to Asia's help and both of them joining Kuo Academy. Their everyday costumers were now mainly high school students, both males and females, as they all wanted to see their respective idols. Speaking of which, Rias was coming to their house to help Asia with her language problems and other school work she was unfamiliar with. The young former nun was a hard-working student, but she had a lot of trouble with kanji and Japanese, so Rias had offered her help. Naruto had wanted to help, but teacher was never his favorite job, not that he denied it anyway. When they were coming near the house, Naruto caught sight of the familiar and unique color of Rias' hair. The crimson-haired girl was standing with her back leaning against the gate, looking as stunning as ever. Of course she is, Naruto thought to himself, she is a devil after all. Rias turned her head towards the coming noise and saw the familiar ramen stand along with her favorite blonde and his adopted sister. A smile formed on her face as Naruto waved his hand at her. "You're pretty early, Rias." Naruto smiled at her as he opened the gate. "Good evening, Rias-senpai." Asia bowed her head down to the older girl in front of her. "Good evening to you too, Asia-chan." Asia beamed at her. "Come in," Naruto said from the house as he finished putting the stand into his yard, "and please make yourself at home, Rias-chan." He grinned at the heiress of the Grimoire household. "Thank you, Naruto-kun." Rias giggled and came into his house with Asia following close behind. Rias's tutoring started as soon as Asia finished her bath. While both girls was studying, Naruto lied on his back on the couch and closed his eyes, decided to have a little nap after the tiring day. His mind wandered back to the old days, the days when there was still an elemental nations, Konoha, and ninja. Who could have thought he missed those days so much, where he didn't have a care in the world other than the duty as Hokage. A hard work day followed by a return home at noon and some quality time with his family. A smile formed on his face as he remembered Bolt's pranks and all the times he needed to step in to stop him. The pranks and jokes had lessened as Bolt grew up and he had Himeyori there to help control him, but everyday living with them was an adventure, a great adventure. Naruto then remembered about Hinata, his wife, the woman who had loved him and secretly supported him since she was young. He always wondered, even after a few thousand years, why he was so oblivious to her feelings back then. He missed her dearly, her gentle smile, the way she blushed whenever he was near her, the passionate feelings she held for him, her beautiful face with blue-green eyes. Wait, Hinata's eyes was pale purple. Another woman appeared in Naruto's mind. She was standing with her back to him, long and beautiful crimson hair flowing down her back like an eternal waterfall. She was wearing a white dress that hugged her body nicely and showed off her amazing figure. Naruto's heart stopped when she turned her head back to him and offering him her hand. Her long bangs shadowed her face but he could see the beautiful smile on her pink lips, which slowly began to mouth words. He strained his ears to hear them. "Naruto-kun, Naruto-kun." Naruto slowly opened his eyes and blinked rapidly to clear his vision. "You're Rias-chan?" Naruto asked, though his voice sounded very surprised. Rias was kneeling near the couch with a worried expression. "You're sweating bullets," she informed him, "and I heard you mumbling in your sleep." "Are you okay?" she asked with concern. Yeah, I'm fine." He sat up and saw that Rias was telling the truth. He was soaking wet because of his sweat. "Don't worry about it, how's Asia?" He decided to change the topic. "She is doing great," Rias said with a small smile. "I think at the end of the week she will be able to read Japanese fluently, though speaking fluently may take a little while longer." Before Naruto could open his mouth, Rias had quickly continued, "Asia is sleeping now, I put her to bed after we finished." "Thank you, Rias-chan." He grinned at her and stood up. "Say, you hungry?" I'm about to make some ramen. Ramen? Just what do you normally eat? Rias stood up and glared playfully at him. Ramen. Rias sighed at his answer. Show me the kitchen, she demanded while rolling her sleeves up. I will cook some dinner for you in Asia. Before Naruto could protest, Rias had gone to find the kitchen. Scratching the back of his head, he slowly followed the crimson-haired girl, though his mind was wandering back to the girl in his dream. The girl who held a strong resemblance to Rias Grimori, but the feeling wasn't quite like her. Naruto sat down at the dining table and watched Rias skillfully dance around the kitchen. It was lucky that he had bought some ingredients the previous day just in case Asia wanted to try something different. Because as much as he wanted to eat ramen forever, he still understood that it wasn't a very healthy food, especially for young, growing girl like Asia. While cooking, Rias began to hum a soft tune, which sounded very familiar to Naruto, but he couldn't recall hearing it anywhere. Nonetheless, Rias' voice was very good and the tune made him felt at peace. Here you go, Rias announced and began to put the dishes on the table. She then sat down on the chair next to Naruto and waited for him. Naruto took his chopstick, saying itadakimasu like always before taking the first bite. With only a limited amount of ingredients, Rias could only make 4 dishes, but Naruto could tell that these were delicious just by the smell. It's really good, Naruto said between chews. Wow, your cooking is really good, Rias-chan. Fufu, thank you. Rias giggled with a small blush. I practice every day to improve my skills. Keep it up, you will make an excellent wife someday. He then continued to eat the dinner without realizing that Rias was blushing furiously next to him. You should eat some too, Rias, he suddenly said to her. The two ate in a comfortably silent atmosphere as neither of them wanted to talk during dinner, just quietly enjoying the delicious cooking of Rias. However, Naruto soon decided that he should get to know the young woman next to him, something beyond the information Graphia had told him, of course. So Rias-chan, care to tell me more about yourself, like your family? Rias looked at him in surprise before looking at the bowl in her hand. Well, you can say that I love my family dearly. Rias smiled, though her smile was a little sad. Did something happen? You don't need to tell me if you don't want to. No, it's okay. She shook her head before taking a deep breath. My family had engaged me to somebody that I don't even love, my own family. Naruto is shell-shocked. Arranged marriage, I thought that was too old of a tradition to still be relevant. He asked. Now he understood why her emotions were always fluctuating even though she tried to act normal outside. It's an effort to join two families together, to create a strong bloodline. Rias's hands formed into fists. At least that was what the other family said, and my family wanted me to be happy. But no matter how much I talk to them, they don't change their mind, even my sister. Rias muttered the last part. I guess if I wasn't a daughter of a rich and powerful family, I can at least find my love and then live a happy life. I want someone to look at me as Rias, not Rias Grimori, the daughter of the Grimori household. That's why I live far from my family and stay here in Japan, where at least people will look at me as a young girl. Tears formed at the corner of her eyes as she remembered all of the heated fights she had with her family about the engagement, yet she couldn't bring herself to hate them. Suddenly, Naruto put his hand underneath her chair and pulled it, along with Rias, towards him. The crimson-haired girl didn't have time to gasp in surprise as Naruto put his arm around her shoulders and brought her head against his chest. Rias then felt a familiar feeling blooming in her heart. She felt warm, comforted, and safe. It was strange because this was the first time he had done this to her, yet it felt like he had done this more than 100 times. It's just like the feeling she always missed after that accident 10 years ago, yet she didn't recall anything. You just need to be yourself, Rias-chan. He didn't know why he did this, he was just following his instincts. Sadness isn't a feeling that suits you. I don't think I can help you. He would if he knew how, but if this helps, I've always liked you, Rias-chan. Not because you're Rias Grimori, the girl who comes from a super rich family, but because you're Rias Grimori, my first costumer and my first real friend since I came here. Rias, cheeks reddened by both his actions and words, but then a soft smile appeared on her lips as she snuggled closer to him. Rias wanted to enjoy this moment and didn't have any plans to ruin it. Oni-sama. A soft gasp made both Naruto and Rias jump in surprise, while the former cursed himself for letting his guard down like that. He had enjoyed this way too much to the point he had come to completely oblivious of his surroundings. When he turned his head toward the kitchen's door, Naruto was met with a fuming Asia Argento, looking at both of them with blushing cheeks and an angry, yet extremely cute expression on her face. Oh, hey Asia. Naruto grinned sheepishly and released Rias, who glared at Asia for ruining the moment. I didn't know that Rias-senpai and Naruto-ni-sama like each other, Asia pouted while glaring at Rias, but I won't lose to you Rias-senpai. You won't lose to me. Really Asia-chan. Rias folded her arms underneath her big breasts and walked to Asia. Looking down at the younger girl with a playful smirk, don't you realize that you're already losing? Rias slightly pushed her breasts up to make them look bigger, making the blush on Asia's face even redder. The girls continued to glare at each other while Naruto kept turning his head back and forth between both of them. After a minute his patience ran out and Naruto decided to speak up. What are you two talking about anyway? Naruto stood up and looked at Asia. Asia, are you feeling hungry? Let's me heat up dinner for you. Of course Ni-sama. Asia nodded her head rapidly and ran to stay by his side, not forgetting to stick her tongue out at Rias. The crimson heiress just giggled while keeping her eyes on the two blondes. Then her face turned into a frown as she remembered who would come tomorrow to have a meeting with her in her peerage. But she wouldn't back down. Not after she had just found out the right one to be with. Excuse me, can you tell me where can I find Rias Grimori-san? Shii is in her clubroom at the old school building. Thank you. Kya, Naruto-sama just talked to me. Naruto chuckled quietly as he walked through the corridors of Kuo Academy after asking for the whereabouts of Rias from a group of second-year girls. Naruto walked out of the new school building with his hands in his pockets. For some reason, he couldn't sense Rias's signature anymore and that was why he had to ask for her probable location. Then, when Naruto was about to enter the old school building, he suddenly found his body unable to continue forwards. Frowning, Naruto used his hand to touch the air in front of him and felt something akin to a wall blocking his path. No wonder he couldn't sense Rias or Akeno. Grinning, Naruto made some hand seals before clapping his hands together. In a puff of smoke, a piece of paper appeared in his hands along with a brush and bottle of ink. The blonde smirked as he began to write some complicated kanji onto the paper. Bad move Rias-chan, you're messing with a Fuinjutsu master here. I wonder how she'll react. Naruto finished his work and brought the paper up to the invisible barrier and channeled his chakra into the piece of paper. Instantly, the barrier disappeared and Naruto walked into the school building without any problem. Now he was able to sense Rias's group's signature along with a large amount of other presences he didn't recognize. Though he was able to detect a very familiar one among them. A party or something, Naruto wondered. Rias, how about we have a match in 10 days? We could do it now, but that wouldn't be interesting. When Naruto came near enough, he heard an unfamiliar voice, full of arrogance, belonging to a male, probably about his age. Are you giving me a handicap? Naruto heard Rias say, though he had never heard her voice with so much frustration in them before, things were definitely heating up in there. Are you against it? Is it humiliating? A rating game isn't something simple that you can win with only your feelings. If you can't use your servant's power to their fullest potential, then you will lose immediately. So it's not weird for you to train with your servants for your first rating game. I have seen devils who lost because they didn't use their power to the fullest countless of times. No matter how great their potential and power was. Nice speech, Naruto thought to himself, but that speech would be so much nicer if the one who said it from the deepest part of their heart, not because they looked down on other people. This guy must be very confident in his power and full of himself. Who's there? Graphia suddenly said, making the room fall into silence. Though she trailed off near the end, which meant she had recognized who was the person that was eavesdropping on them. Decided to play dumb, Naruto put his hand on the handle and pushed open the door. Oh hey, sorry to disturb, but I'm looking for Rias Grimori. Naruto grinned while scratching the back of his head. Oh, hey Rias-chan. He grinned broadly at the Crimson Heiress who was looking at him with her mouth agape. And Naruto-kun. Akeno was the first one who recovered by his sudden appearance. She, like everyone else, was wondering how he was able to get past the barrier around the old school building, which was cast by Graphia herself. Can I come in? Naruto looked around the room and saw a tall man with blonde hair, wearing an expensive-looking suit with his chest exposed a little. He was looking at him with disgust in his eyes. No. Yes. Rias and Graphia then turned their heads to look at each other, a frown appearing on both of their beautiful faces. Graphia, he is my guest and this is my clubroom. Naruto-kun can come in if he wants to. Rias said clearly. Unfortunately Ojo-sama, this matter isn't for outsiders to hear. Graphia said with a calm and emotionless tone to Rias before turning her head to Naruto. So Naruto-san, can you please leave this room immediately? You can come over later. Naruto had to hold back a wolf whistle at that. Graphia was like a completely different woman. The look on her face and the possible threat in her tone could send anyone running away with their tail between their legs. She was completely serious, though he had to admit she did look really good in that French-maid outfit. Damn, no need to be so cold, maid-san. Naruto laughed nervously, decided to play dumb for now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of small visiting cards. I just want to give Rias-chan and her club my new visiting cards for my ramen stand, that's all. Business has been really good lately, so I want to increase our area notability. He said mainly to himself and went inside the room to give them the visiting cards, one for each member of the Occult Research Club, which they took it gratefully while Issei looked a little scared. Naruto could tell that he was in pain, like he just got into a fight. The blonde then turned to Graphia and handed her a card. You too, maid-san. If you have free time, feel free to come over and give us a try. He smirked. I will, Naruto-san, she said with the same stern voice and stoic tone. Damn, she is so professional. Naruto thought to himself as he looked at the maid with amusement. Then the blonde turned his head to the unfamiliar faces in the room and saw that most of them were females, with beauty ranging from cute to downright gorgeous, though nowhere near the level of his friends. However, the look on the other blonde man's face was slowly getting on his nerves. Naruto was never one who liked those with holier-than-thou attitudes. Especially from one that was also looking at him with disgust. Hey, you girls wanna try Uzumaki ramen sometime? The blood asked while grinning broadly, making a number of the girls in front of him blush furiously. He could hear Graphia sigh quietly behind him, like she had expected him to say something like that. Before he could give them the cards, their male leader held out his hand to block his path. You got a problem, dude? Naruto asked, still keeping the grin on his face. How dare you present such a filthy food to my servants? The man said with an arrogant tone. You have no idea what are you talking about, dude. Naruto's grin disappeared from his face and was replaced with a scowl. Faster than anyone's eyes could see, Naruto had grabbed the man by his collar and smashed his forehead into the slightly taller blonde's face before pushing him away, much to everyone's shock. No one insults the wonder that is ramen, no one dadbeo. He pointed his finger at the son of Finek's household, shouting out his thoughts along with his forever trademark catchphrase. Just after Rias managed to pick her mouth off the ground, the Crimson Heiress began to giggle at the pathetic form of her aggressor, who was clutching his nose in pain while lying on the ground. Graphia just sighed. For some reason she had already knew he would do something like that. You, how dare you do this to me, you lowly human? Naruto raised an eyebrow at this. There was no blood on the guy's face, nor did it look broken. He would have to ask Graphia about this later. You're talking like you're not human. Naruto raised an eyebrow while pretending to be in amusement by the blonde's joke. The group of girls from earlier had already recovered from the shock and were now glaring daggers at him for hurting their master, though a petite girl with drilled twin tails was looking at him with confusion. His name, it's oddly familiar. She wondered to herself. She swore that she had read that name before in one of the very old books in her family's personal library, though she couldn't remember which one. That's quite enough, Riser-sama. Graphia spoke up in a cold, chilling tone. So that's the prick's name. Naruto thought before hearing Graphia continue. If you say anything further, I will have to cut short this meeting right here, by force. She finished emotionlessly, making Riser gulp nervously with a pale white face. Naruto looked at Graphia. The silver-haired maid had to be extremely powerful and fearsome among devils to have such an impact like that to someone who had clearly lived most of his life looking down on everyone whose status was lower than his. Right, Razor muttered to himself, earning a nod from Graphia. Good. Then, Graifa turned her eyes to the vice president of Orc Club, Akeno-san. Please escort Naruto-san outside so we can finish this meeting without any more trouble. Yes, Graphia-san. Akeno nodded her head before turning to the blonde. Naruto-kun, please follow me. Just a minute, Akeno-chan. Naruto brought his hand up to stop her before he walked up to the girls behind Riser and gave them the cards. Make sure to pay a visit later, okay? He grinned at the last girl who was the only one who didn't glare at him. She nodded her head slowly while sporting a small blush on her face. Right, off I go. See ya later, Rias-chan. Naruto waved to her and walked out of the room with Akeno following closely behind. When the two finally got out of the building, Akeno led him to a nearby bench to sit down with him. Akeno wanted to stay to make sure that Naruto wouldn't come inside again, but mainly she wanted to spend some time with him to get to know the mysterious blonde who had caught the interest of her king, whose name happened to appear in every conversation the two had. So, who was the guy? Naruto asked with a bored tone. He is Riser Phoenix-sama, Akeno informed him, Bushu's fiancé. Naruto widened his eyes. That was her future husband. No wonder why she was so against this marriage. That guy needs to remove that stick from his ass really soon. Naruto said casually, earning a slap on the arm from a giggling Akeno. You shouldn't say that, Naruto-kun. Reaching into her skirt's pocket, Akeno pulled out the visiting card Naruto had given to her. So, no longer a humble small ramen stand owner, Naruto-kun. Yeah, like I said, business has been really good recently. He chuckled. I mean, I have a cute, little angel for a sister as my waitress, and I also have two beautiful girls, who happen to be the two most popular girls of Kuo Academy, visit my stand daily. He said, making Akeno giggle while covering her mouth with her hand, a pink hue dusting her cheeks. Alright, I will make sure to stop over soon. Akeno said before standing up and smiling warmly to him. See you later, Naruto-kun. She then turned around and returned to her clubroom, not realizing that when she turned around, her skirt had been lifted up by the wind and exposed what was underneath to the very eyes of the Ika Ika Paradise series' author. Black. Good for her. Naruto muttered to himself before standing up and returning to the new school building. Asia was probably come looking for him by now. Better not let her be an easy target for any lustful teenagers. Asia, you think I need to keep our store name Uzumaki Ramen or change it to The Wonderful of Ramen? I think we should just leave it as Uzumaki Ramen, ni-sama. Naruto shrugged his shoulder and continued to bring tables, chairs, and a lot of other things into his newly bought house, which would become the place they would be working from next week onward. Asia was helping him with leaning, but with just two people, even with one with superhuman strength, it still already took them more than 3 hours to get things done. He had already hired extra help, mainly waitresses, because Asia wouldn't be able to solo all of the costumers herself. Of course he was planning to hire an assistant chef as well, but he doubted that they would be able to get the taste of Uzumaki ramen right. Naruto-kun. The door of his new store opened. Naruto looked up when his name was called, and his face then turned into a grin when he saw his favorite crimson-haired customer. "Ohayo Rias-chan." Naruto greeted Rias cheerfully. "Hello Rias-senpai." Asia bowed her head with a small smile, holding the broomstick in her hands. "Hey Asia-chan." Rias waved slightly to her before turning back to Naruto. "Naruto-kun, can I talk to you in private?" Sure." Naruto nodded and led her to the back room. He closed the door behind them and asked with a warm voice, "Rias-chan, what's wrong?" "Naruto-kun, I won't be able to attend school for 10 days. "Really? Why?" Naruto asked, not that surprised because he already knew about what would happen in 10 days. This rating game Riser had talked about. Rias definitely need time to prepare. "I'd prefer not talk about it," Rias said uneasily, "but my future depend on this." "I understand Rias-chan." Naruto nodded and patted her head, "but when things go the way you want, bring everyone to my store to celebrate, on the house." "Thank you." Rias smiled to him before throwing her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly against her. "Thank you," she whispered as Naruto slowly brought his arms around her. "I thought you would ask him to be your servant," Akino asked as she stood with her back leaning against the wall next to Uzumaki ramen. "No Akino, we can't prepare Naruto in just 10 days. Issei will suffice. Plus, I don't want him to get hurt. Razor will probably single him out because of the humiliation Naruto gave him yesterday," Rias said firmly before turning her head to her queen. "Let's go Akino." Shayna Lucifer, formerly Shayna Grimori, sat beside her son's bed, quietly moving a few strands of crimson hair away from her son's adorable face. "Sleep well my son," Shayna whispered before standing up, planting a soft kiss on her 10-year-old son's forehead. Shayna, as quietly as she could, slowly opened the door of her son's room and walked out. "Shayna-sama," Graphia said in a low tone. "Graphia," Shayna smiled at her queen before starting to return to her chambers. "It's a beautiful night, isn't it?" "Yes Shayna-sama," Graphia nodded her head. "Beautiful night, just like 10 years ago." Shayna's smile slowly left her face. Graphia's emotionless expression quivered slightly before she regained her composure. What happened 10 years ago was always a highly disconcerting topic for both of them, especially around this time of the year. She had to be careful with her emotion and words, or else all the efforts she made these past 2 months would become void. "You remember him?" Shayna asked as she turned back to the silver-haired maid. "Ah come on, drop that blank face and answer me truthfully." "Yes Shayna-sama, I still remember Naruto-sama. There's not a single day I'm not thinking about him," Graphia said truthfully. "Of course," Shayna chuckled, "because after all, you love him just as much as I do." Graphia's expression remained impassive, but her eyes softened just a little. "I wonder what would it be like if he was still here." Graphia looked at the woman in front of her, who a long time ago used to be her most dangerous rival. Would we still be looking at each other with heated glares? Would we still be fighting to the point where we would nearly kill each other if not for him deciding to intervene and then scold us like children? Shayna asked while leaning her arms on the window's frame and put her upper body out, her hair flowing in the wind. "I miss those days Graphia." Graphia bit her lower lip as she gripped her uniform's skirt tightly. Shayna had changed so much without Naruto around. She hated it. They were supposed to fight each other to decide who would be the alpha and then at the end of the day would just laugh it off like it was nothing. Graphia looked at herself, even she had changed so much without him. "Please wait for me Shayna, I promise I will bring him back for both of us."